So welcome everyone to this Gender Equality Academy workshop on gender bias in recruitment, promotion, and career management. I am delighted to be the facilitator of this workshop together with my dear colleague, Christina Dragomir. So, my name is Shirin Haydari. I am based in Geneva, Switzerland. I am the founding president of Gendro, which is an association with the mission of mainstreaming gender in research and data analysis, with a particular focus on health research at this time, but generally across research. And I'm also a senior researcher at the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies at the Global Health Center and a research affiliate with the Gender Center. And Christina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Christina Dragomir. I have also a middle name. I don't use it so much. I don't enjoy to include it in my research. That would be Maria. I'm an academic scholar. I work as associate professor at Constanța Maritime University. This is a technical university which is specialized in engineering for navigation, for careers, for seafarers, and also for careers that are related to the port and the transport, international transport domain. Besides that, I am the president of the European Center for Social Responsibility. We organized several projects related to culture, related to gender equality, also environmental projects, but most of our projects are related to academic field. And also, since 2019, I'm the founding member and the general secretary of WISTA. This is Women's International Shipping and Trading Association, which is an international association, really large. It comprises more than 52 countries. And I am glad that I was able to make the premises and the foundation of this association in Romania, because it's really must that we really need to get the attention of policymakers and of other stakeholders related to women empowerment in the really gender bias system of transport. Further, as much as we will continue talking, I will come back and inform you about specific things that are really affecting this sector, which is the transport. And also I would like to make you aware of the fact that mostly everything is surrounding you, like laptops, gadgets, or phones, or etc. Most probably they were brought by sea, by seafarers. Therefore, I don't want to be an advocate of my sector, but there are really interesting facts that you should know about gender bias, and I believe this is the reason which made me made me prepare research in this domain since 2017, and before that I delivered research in the sector, and since 2017 I was the principal investigator of an international project that deals with gender equality in our system.
On the learning objectives of this workshop, this is really just to provide an overview of the imbalances and biases in HR management, in research and academia, sensitize about unconscious biases, and challenge allegedly objective and gender neutral career development opportunities. And again, I don't think we're going to be preaching to the choir now. Everybody has such an extensive experience in this field, and really sharing examples of measures aimed at tackling these biases and building capacity for self-reflection and enhancement of human resource management processes. So handing over to Christina to briefly tell you about the Gender Equality Academy and the agenda of the day, and we start with the first presentation. Christina, can you switch the slides, or do you want me to do it for you?
It's best you will Okay. So in brief, Gender Equality Academy is a very, very useful and interesting project that was funded by the European Union through Horizon programs, and it develops and implements capacity building programs, a lot of trainings related to gender equality in research and innovation, and also all the trainings and all the teaching and learning programs are based on state-of-the-art knowledge and expertise, and is provided a tailor-made training material which is designed for various target groups like decision makers, and we would really like to have decision makers among us, and HR and equality officers, of course, researchers, any other stakeholders from the academia. And the training are organized in different formats, like in-person or online trainings, which we meet more likely today during the pandemics, also webinars, summer schools, and also would be distributed open collaborative course, which are online courses, really self-paced, so they are very good to be attended by persons who have a really busy schedule and programs. These types of courses represent a feminist retooling of the popular genre of networked learning, which are called massive open online courses. And also related to what other trainings are developed by the Gender Equality Academy, I would mention just a few of them. There are plenty more. They are all very interesting, and some of them are complementary. They were delivered since 2 years ago, and also last year. They are related to introduction to gender equality in research and innovation, sex and gender dimension in sciences and technology, a lot of interesting trainings related to gender equality plan, which I also attended. And I confirm they are really useful for designing and also for applying a gender equality plan at the level of your organization. Also, other trainings were related to institutional gender analysis, gender in curricula and teaching, how to make change towards gender equality sustainable, and also summer schools related to gender equality plan, from design to evaluation, monitoring, evaluation for gender equality, and a lot of other courses. You can find them all on the web page of Gender Equality Academy. At the end of our meeting today, we will provide you the links for social media and for how to connect to these great persons from Gender Equality Academy. We try to stick it as much as we can on this agenda. This is a proposed agenda. About the gender imbalances, I will in short remind you that over the last few years, the gender dimension in research content has received increased attention, and this is really good. What is not so pleasant is the fact that we are still discussing about old problems, old issues, but the good thing is we are not hiddening them under the carpet. We just put them in the spotlight, and policymakers are searching for solutions. Therefore, the rationale is that integrated sex and gender analysis enhances the quality of research and innovation. And in the European research area, gender mainstreaming in research is one of the 6 key priorities, and this is really good. And I'm glad that the European Commission and also national research funding agencies from several countries and institutions encourage researchers to include the gender dimension in their grant proposals. when relevant. And this is really great because we see now we have the support coming from the European institutions, so the decisional bodies emphasizing solutions for gender bias. However, gender imbalances are still present, and most important, we need to tackle their underlying causes. And now, further, for the next slide, in order to underline this type of causes, we are addressing gender bias through metaphors. And in this slide, you can see one of the metaphors. It is about glass ceiling, which is often related to cases that we meet in our working environment, in our research or academia organizations, and in other organizations. It is the sticky floor and glass ceiling or glass walls that female can see but cannot touch, cannot break. A better metaphor for what confronts professional women is the labyrinth, the idea of complex navigation through multiple obstacles and challenges, requiring a variety of organizational and personal strategy to succeed. So glass ceiling often is related to justice issues and brings in front multiple and complex challenges that women face, no matter their sector, no matter their domain. Let's see the next slide. The next slide is for another metaphor beside the glass ceiling. This is the metaphor of the leaky pipeline. I'm not sure if you can zoom it. Hopefully you can zoom it. This is a problematic situation where an approximately equal share of students, male and female, join the academic system, which is very good. But the sad part is that within the process of employment and advancement in academic careers, resources of scientists, women power drain, like in this leaky pipeline, drain and exit the academic community, and which would be the causes for this situation? Well, would be related to stereotypes or lack of opportunities for female scientists employment, and various obstacles and barriers. We will discuss about them in the exercise that we will do before the break. And I would add that the leaky pipeline of women in science, technological, engineering and maths, STEM sector, why not even in art system, it's really affecting the resources, the female resources, and the leaky pipeline often depicts women passively leaking out of STEM careers with no discussion of why those leaks occur. So we spotted the problem. We will think to solutions. What is most important is the fact that after we spot the solution, we should think how exactly we can bring some change in order to transform these solutions from our mind in physical, in concrete, in real action, in order to avoid this type of leaky pipeline. From my point of view, the fact that you are all here with us and we are discussing about these issues is really a solution coming from a concept to real fact, real action. Okay, so, and also I would like here to add that cracks and gaps caused by the biases and barriers are a major cause of the leak of women and minorities. We find that many physical science or engineering or other domains, undergraduate students complete their majors without ever having taken a course from a female professor, and this is sad. I often see these types of situation in my case, in the engineering a lot. I see it a lot. Let's see the next slide. The next slide is dealing with another metaphor. It is called the Matilda effect. and also the honeypot indicator. And I will tell you right away what it's about. The Matilda effect comes from a really visionary person called Matilda Jocelyn Gage. She lived in 1826 until 1898, so some time ago. She was a women's suffragist. She was a Native American rights activist, abolitionist, free thinker, and author. And she's the eponym for the Matilda effect, which describes the tendency to deny women credit for scientific innovation. The scientific historian Margaret Rossiter coined the term Matilda effect to identify the social situation where women scientists inaccurately receive less credit for their scientific work than an objective examination of their efforts. And this effect, what is interesting is that this effect is the opposite of another effect, which is called the Matthew effect. It was coined by Robert Merton in 1968, so pretty long time ago. Also, that this is the reason I told you we are discussing by aspects that are not new. These aspects affected a lot women and the society overall. The good thing is that that now we are discussing about them. So in the Matthew effect, what happened? Scientists already famous were overcredited with new discoveries. And about the honeypot indicator, this is related to resources. When we think to bee, we think that bees are attracted by the honey and will get around in those places where are resources. The issue is that bees around it are mainly men. Access to resources or information is often barred to people in the outer group and is controlled by the inner group. So there are often the cases when women are removed from access to resources. And the statistics will make you understand that the issues, the causes that you identified in the exercises are really reflected in scientific papers. For example, you can see in this slide here a chart showing horizontal segregation and the percentage of female researchers in the higher education sector in the European Union by scientific field. And you can see below the countries, the colors of the countries, you can see the averages, you can see the distinct fields of natural sciences, engineering and technology, medical sciences, agricultural, social, and humanities. And you can spot here that there are really huge discrepancies between countries when we are discussing about the percentage of female researchers in the higher education sector. Overall, it is good that female are represented in all the European Union countries. This is very good. What is not so good is the fact that there is not a common average for all the countries. But if we would compare the situation of the European Union with other continents, and I'm referring now to the specific situation of Afghanistan, we all heard about the critical situation, the political situation there. I was just reading in the morning the difficult case of women wanting to learn, and women are really denied the opportunity to go to school. So this is really the worst scenario ever. Women are not only allowed to learn, but they are also not allowed to get employment. Consider only that the medical sector is really affected by this. And we are not only talking here about higher education, we are talking here about the basic education and the lack of medical staff, which were in majority women before the Taliban regime, and now only men are allowed to practice medicine. We are just not thinking anymore to the COVID and pandemic crisis. We are thinking now to basic necessities of the ordinary society. So they are really affected. Therefore, this image here, this chart here is somehow optimistic, because we still have female researchers in the higher education. Of course, we want to improve. We want to have the best scenario here, especially with the fact that the European Union is encouraging the percentage of female researchers in the higher education through different actions, and even with these types of programs like the Gender Equality Academy training we are doing today. Okay, let's see the second chart. This is the vertical segregation. We see here the proportion of men. We see here the proportion of women in a typical academic career in science and engineering, both for students and academic staff. What we conclude, so it's really obvious that from the bachelor programs to the senior researcher, male have distinct areas on compared to female, who are really affected by their chances to develop a career in science and engineering. We will discuss in our further exercises, we using the mirror boards about steps related to recruitment, and after that solutions. But what is most critical here is to spot that since the bachelor studies until after graduation and until the long-term career situation, the discrepancies and the biases are really obvious. Let's see the further chart, gender bias in access to resources. This is about the grant review procedure, and you can see here the success rates for male and female applicants for each phase. Again, you can see very clear that male applicants have a much higher success rate compared to female applicants. And we are referring to applications, to pre-selection, to interviews, and specifically to receiving awards. Let's see further, gender bias in access to resources. Now we are bringing in the spotlight the number of applications and grants awarded for men and women for each of the scientific disciplines. And you have here the disciplines: physics, chemical sciences, physical, interdisciplinary, technical, humanities, earth and life, medical, and social. And I will add here my personal experience. So I find myself somewhere in this chart here, because I told you at the beginning, in 2017 until 2018, I was the principal investigator of international research, which I am really proud of, and I would like to share it with you. It was a study comprising 9 countries, including Romania, which was the principal coordinator, and countries from other 4 continents. Different countries with different GDPs, etc. What is the story to take from this research? The conclusion was really clear. The maritime sector is really affected by the gender bias. But the issue was when I applied for the competition for earning this type of research. So I really struggled in order to fill in the application by myself, and I had to compete with other 2 male colleagues in the same institution that were also wanted to compete for the same grant opportunity. And the story is the real story is like it was classification made at the level of my institution. I don't really know on which assessment criteria, but I was informed that my proposal was denied at the level of my institution. That means my proposal for this really great project had no chances to go to the financing institution. Therefore, I was really upset when I found that this was happening. I just left the room. I don't know, I think I did not crush the door, but I slammed it, definitely. My colleagues observed that I was really, really sad about that, because all that grant application was supported by the representatives of the other 8 countries' institutions. So I really felt ashamed that I had to tell them, unfortunately, my colleagues denied the application and will not go further to the financing institution for joining the competition. But the interesting fact was that after my disappointment, the administrative staff from my institution called me, invited me to return to discuss more, etc., etc. In the end, I submitted the application, even if my colleagues were not aware of that, but I had the support of my rector. So I sent the application. Times passed. There was the screening process, and all the applications were submitted, were analyzed, and finally my project got the approval of the financing body. And my colleagues were really, really surprised, because they did not know that I sent my application to the finance institution. Therefore, when I received the finance for this project, which again was the largest as number of participants, I've told you 9 countries, but the budget was really, really low. I'm really ashamed to tell you that was like $60,000, $65, yes, and we had to split it in 9 persons for 1 year, so it was really low. But the idea was that somehow, with the support of my rector, I managed to pass somehow these barriers that my colleagues were pushing me. Yeah, this is my story. Anyway, they congratulated me after 1 year. Was nice to feel that. Yeah. So let's see here, gender bias in access to international research mobility. You see here sex differences in international mobility of researchers. Definitely men are more mobile than women. Again, this happens in my case also. Now when I have kids that I have to take care of, mobility is really difficult for me, especially until my children will have a certain age and I can take them with me. Otherwise, I would just refuse mobility, and possible you might feel the same, or for other reasons you might find mobility difficult. Okay, and the next slide, gender bias in access to international research mobility. Here is a study made in a Belgian university. The number of professional trips made by teaching and research staff was analyzed according to their family charges. And the data indicate that men with children are the ones who travel most frequently. Obviously, children being left at home with the wife. And the next one, I will have to check which Belgian university exactly, and I will write you in the chat. Oh, here another chart, intersectionality of bias, a complex picture where gender and origin intersect. Another study examines how intersecting stereotypes about gender and race influence faculty perceptions. And there was this study where a research university were asked to read one of 8 identical CVs related to hypothetical doctoral graduate applying for a postdoctoral position in their field and rate them for competence, hireability, and likability. Again, from my personal experience, I know in my country were some issues appeared in the mass media when persons who would apply for postdoctoral position were denied their access to this type of postdoctoral position for various reasons. But now we are referring in the particular case of races and of genders. And you can see here for the Department of Physics and for the Department of Biology, who were more preferred and who were less preferred, and which were the distributions of competence ratings and hireability ratings. Okay, and for the next slide, the Leaky pipeline, we have discussed it. Yes, the next
Sorry,
one.
Christina, that's going to be on the section that I'm going to cover.
That's great.
So what I want to talk now, this is actually not part of the standard GE Academy actually slide set, but I want to bring this up because I think this is an aspect that is often forgotten, and that's around the productivity puzzle. Again, a lot of the gender-related aspects are covered, and where we are talking about Leaky pipeline, we know that there is evidence about while there are equal number of women and men that are entering academia, as they advance through the academic career, more women than men drop out over the years. And we, as mentioned during this course and also during your breakout groups, there are many hypotheses for that. It's motherhood, it's family commitments, fewer grants, lower amounts of funds. And another important reason is often referred to, that you also brought it up in your breakout group discussions, is actually lower productivity. So in reality, there is likely a combination of all of these factors, and many of these are well explored, but I would really like to draw your attention to women and their scientific productivity over the next few minutes, because this is an aspect that I think is not paid attention enough to. So there is a rather large body of evidence that shows that the women researchers publish on average fewer articles than men, and is even the case early in their career, which has been difficult to explain. And this has been referred to as the productivity puzzle. As you see in this figure shows the mean number of publication for ecology and evolutionary biology from British and Australian universities. And again, while this is old, I think a little bit of this gap still remains. And you see already at year 1 after the first publication, there is a persisting gap, and that gap is widening as the researchers advance in their careers. Now, why is it important? It's important because academic publication is important for many reasons and is often the one and only measure of scientific productivity and a validation of academic achievement and a sign of academic recognition. So number of scholarly publications and articles, the ranking of the journals one publishes in, the number of citations one publication gets, all of these can provide a proxy on the excellence of a researcher, and is one of the key criteria for tenure track positions, promotions, research grant funding, and other academic awards. Now, Again, why women publish fewer articles? There have been the traditional hypotheses around the number of personal characteristics and organizational factors such as motherhood, childcare, and family responsibilities, more teaching and administrative responsibilities. And also these days, with more and more universities taking on responsibilities and starting initiatives around gender equality and gender mainstreaming, even the burden of that work often falls on women. And this is what is called the kind of the unpaid or unrecognized additional care work in institutions. But one aspect that is less explored is whether or not there are actually potential gender biases in the publication process itself. There are no compelling evidence. I have to just really make it clear that there are no compelling evidence that this might be the case or it might not be the case. And there, of course, will be great variations across disciplines and across geographies, but there are some really interesting studies that can provide some insight. So first is the gender bias in authorship. As mentioned, there could be bias in negotiating and deciding authorship. We talked about the Matilda effect when women are not included as an author, even when they have made a substantial contribution, or that their contribution is undervalued. So they may not be included as the first author, or may also not be less assertive in requesting the prestigious first or last authorship. There could also be a gender bias in the peer review process itself. Again, while there is limited data, there are anecdotal cases that can point that this could in fact be the case. So this is a very example, kind of a incident that happened a few years ago. It was a manuscript that was submitted by two female biologists, and they actually shared the comment of one of the peer reviewers on Twitter, and that really sparked a debate and a conversation. So this is what the reviewer actually says: find one or two male biologists to work with, or at least obtain internal peer review from, but better yet, as active co-authors, in order to serve as a possible check against interpretations that may sometimes be drifting too far away from empirical evidence into ideologically based assumptions. So again, of course, not all peer reviewers will express such an explicit sexism, but there are evidence that there might be implicit and unconscious biases that can favor male scientific competence and underestimate and undervalue women's. In this case, there was a study looking at the peer review scores for postdoctoral fellowship applications in Sweden, and the authors state that they found the system riddled with prejudice, where women were given lower competence rating than men, even if they had the same or better publication record. And according to this study, women had to be 2.5 times more productive to get the same score. And another case that you probably as well mentioned is that was a randomized double-blind study in the US, where researchers prepared identical CVs for a lab manager position and randomly assigned a female or a male name to them. And the CVs and applications were submitted to faculty members for assessment. And they found that both female and male faculty judged a female applicant to be less competent, less worthy of being hired than the identical male applicant, and also offered her a smaller starting salary and less career mentoring. So there are indications that such a peer review, such a kind of a bias can also occur in the peer review process of publications. Another study from the field of economics also shed more light on the peer review process. And in this study, they point out that the peer reviewers might be more critical to female authored papers. And as in their study, they showed that female authored papers needed 6 months longer to complete the peer review, likely because more critical comments or greater requests for revisions by the reviewers and editors. Again, the issue of gender bias in peer review evaluation is a really challenging one and very difficult to measure. But this is a study that tried to look at this through another approach. This journal introduced a double-blind peer review and looked at the percentage of female authors before and after the introduction of the double review process. And they could find that after introducing double-blind review, there was a nearly 8% increase in the proportion of papers with a female first author. And interestingly enough, there was a corresponding decrease in papers with a male first author. And this really shows that when reviewers do not know the gender of the authors, female authors might have a better chance as their papers might be evaluated more objectively. And similarly, male authors will not also get overvalued for papers that they might actually not merit publications. And again, there are biases in the editorial process. Studies consistently show that women are grossly underrepresented among peer reviewers. And this analysis shows that in most of these leading medical journals, women constitute no more than 20% of the peer reviewers. Again, this might have changed over the last few years. There have been a lot of efforts by journals, but also that women are underrepresented among editors and editorial board members, and editors are one of the gatekeepers who make the final decisions about what needs to be published, what is constituting excellence, or what is supposedly novel or a strong publication. So these are sobering figures that simply show that other factors may also be responsible for women's lower publication output other than just childbearing or child rearing potentials. And women publishing fewer research articles there are also studies showing that their articles are also cited to a lesser extent. And this will result that they get less funding, less likely to be invited as peer reviewers or editors. They're less visible, and having more difficulties getting promoted becomes a vicious cycle, as Richard Horden and Justin Clark put it, and kind of a result and reinforces that leaky pipeline. So the question is whether these performance differences between male and female is a cause or a consequence of the gender biases that we see in the academic system. And again, regardless, this shows that the academic publication process is highly gendered, and there are many invisible powers and privileges and unseen roadblocks that lead to unequal opportunities to women to excel in science. And these are also often overlooked in hiring practices and recruitments and promotions as well. So again, comes back to the assumptions of merit, specifically in hiring practices, which is a lot of emphasis about, competence, merit, and that the assumption that the scientific inquiry and evaluation of scientific knowledge and excellence is really based on rationality, objectivity, and merit is really disputed, because I think the whole process is highly gendered. Presentation, which is really trying to look at the unconscious bias. And again, we have looked at the different states and effects, the horizontal, vertical segregations, the metaphors that explain the various effects of the gender-related barriers and obstacles, access to resources, the productivity puzzles, and notion of meritocracy. But now we can really try to look at these underlying causes and how unconscious bias can influence and reproduce gender and other inequalities. And again, we are focusing a lot on gender, but it's also really important to consider the intersectionality part of this as well, that, particularly women of color, women of different ethnic minorities, different women of sexual orientation and diverse sexual orientation and gender identities, women with disabilities, they all have an additional or compounded disadvantage in academia as well, even if, data around that is less limited. So unconscious bias is a term that is used to describe the associations that we rapidly make, often outside our conscious awareness, that really influences our opinions, attitudes, behaviors, and the decisions we make. Even when we believe that we are actually very fair and just in our mind, we have some level of unconscious biases, meaning that it's very automatic the way we think and respond to different people and different situations in a positive or a negative way. And these perceptions and associations are very much ingrained in our thinking and emotions. They are quite difficult, actually, to get rid of them, even when we are becoming aware of them, or even when we recognize that that is wrong, because sometimes, again, it's really automatic and very quick. But it's important to note that also the biases not always unconscious or implicit. They're also sometimes very conscious and very explicit biases. And a case was that the peer reviewer that had a very explicit sexist comment. I mean, that's not even implicit anymore. So this is an example of a visual biases. How many of you think that one of these kind of visuals is actually moving? Raise your hands so I can see. Yeah, exactly. Me too. I mean, even if we know that both of them are actually static pictures, never mind, our mind tells us that one of them are moving, actually. It just really tries to kind of exemplify how our brain can actually fool us. Another example is actually the color race that we call it. And it really just exactly provides an example of how our mind processes information very automatically. So here you see a list of words in different colors. We're just used to reading that. And of course, this can be very useful, in particular when we, for example, can drive and at the same time read our kind of the road sign and so on and so forth. But that also shows that sometimes we can be very quick in judgment without actually paying attention to the details and the information. And it doesn't always work the way we want it to do. So it just the point to show that it just happens, and trying to be more conscious takes more time, and we often refer to the fastest way where we can make decisions. So this is just to say that decisions and opinions are affected unconsciously by our backgrounds, our experiences, our cultures. In many situations, our brain implicitly makes really fast judgments and assessments of people and situations, and biases remain, again, even if we are somewhat aware of them. Many behavioral and decision-making biases have been really described in the literature, and they're referred to as affinity bias, they're confirmation bias, halo bias, attribution bias, in-group bias, and so on and so forth. A lot of us think we can make evaluations based on quality alone or merit alone, but we are, again, very much making decisions influenced by our past experience or backgrounds. Again, gender bias is one of the most common biases. And this is, again, this kind of, and it results, these biases results in, of course, prejudice and discrimination, and they are inevitable byproducts of the efficiency sometimes in our human brain. This is something called the Cognitive Bias Codex, and this is a handy visual tool that really organizes biases in a kind of a meaningful way. It's also kind of mixes heuristics and biases, so again, it's important to keep that in mind. And it could be useful for visualizing all the different known biases. It's said that is estimated 180 cognitive biases, that they are grouped and arranged in this codex in a circle, divided in 4 quadrants, and each quadrant is dedicated to a specific group of cognitive biases. One is what should we remember? These are biases that affect our memory for people, events, or information. Too much information, biases that are related to too much information that affect how we perceive certain events and people. Another group of biases called not enough meaning, that we use these biases when we have too little information and we just use our own existing knowledge to fill in the gap, even if that would result in a pure inaccuracy. And the need to act fast, biases that affect how we make decisions, in particular when we want to really make quick decisions. Most common form of biases are confirmation biases, bias, gender bias. Again, confirmation bias is a bias that is based on looking for or overvaluing information that confirms our existing beliefs or expectations. Gender bias, that is, of course, very common. It describes our tendency to assign specific behavior or characteristics to a particular gender without supporting evidence. And group attribution error, this error describes our tendency to overgeneralize how a group of people will behave based on an interaction with only one person from that group. Can I make a quick break and see if anybody would like to share an example of such biases that you might have attended or experienced, either yourself or you've come up, that you caught yourself having those biases? I think the next one, we want to kind of show you a video. Let me see if this actually works.
The unconscious mind is amazing. It can process vastly more information than our conscious mind.
Shirin, we can't hear you because I think you mute yourself, so we can't hear your audio. Yeah.
The answer is actually 5 pence.
Shall I go back?
Many of us choose
Yes,
10
please.
pence at the time.
Yes.
Don't forget to click when you share the video. Don't forget to click for the audio option in the corner in the left.
Can you hear it now, the sound, or not at all?
The unconscious mind is amazing. It can process vastly more information than our conscious mind by using shortcuts based on our background, cultural environment, and personal experiences to make almost instantaneous decisions about everything around us. The snag is, it's wrong quite a lot of the time, especially on matters that need rational thinking. Here's a classic example. A bat and a ball cost £1 10 pence. If the bat costs £1 more than the ball, how much does the ball cost? Most people, including over 50% of students at some of the world's leading universities, get the answer wrong and say 10 pence. The answer is actually 5 pence. Many of us choose 10 pence without thinking. This is because our unconscious mind uses instinct, not analysis. So our unconscious is fallible. It's also biased. It makes snap judgments of people we meet, categorizing them according to gender, social, and other characteristics. In milliseconds, we judge whether somebody is like us and belongs to our in-group. These are the people we favor. So men might favor men, while women might favor women. However, we can belong to different in-groups, and we like to be part of an in-group that's powerful, which could mean a woman favoring a man over a woman. That's unconscious bias. All of us have it, and it colors our decisions without our realizing. For example, research reveals that if I were a man, you would be more likely to be nodding in agreement right now because people pay more attention to a male voice. The Royal Society fosters excellence in science, but this can only be achieved if we select from the widest range of talent. And that's not possible if unconscious bias is narrowing down the field for non-scientific reasons. To lessen the impact of unconscious bias, which is easier for us to notice in others, we are raising the awareness of unconscious bias to members of our selection and appointment panels. We're encouraging panel members to deliberately slow down decision-making, reconsider reasons for decisions, question cultural stereotypes, and monitor each other for unconscious bias. We can't cure unconscious bias, but with self-awareness, we can address it.
Great. Here we go. So just going back to how does unconscious bias influence scientific careers and career advancement. As mentioned, again, a lot of these biases can influence a lot of the decision made across, in the publications, in the peer review process, in deciding which journals or which papers to cite. Again, there are studies showing that the women's female authored papers are cited to a lesser extent in certain disciplines. Publication rates, patent applications, again, hiring decisions, research grant applications, evaluation of conference abstracts, symposia, speaker invitation, postdoctoral employment, prestigious science awards, including the Nobel Prize, and tenure decisions. Again, all of those biases can really kind of are intertwined, and of course, and they also evolve and accumulate along the career path. And again, a combination of these can really, that's what it leads to the gradual abandonment of scientific careers by many women, and the number of which are decreasing at each career stages. And again, additional examples that you also raised now, as some of our participants raised, is biased letter of recommendation. Whether they are men or women, people signing letters of recommendation use less sharp and assertive formulas when it comes to female candidates. And the presence of these types of formula, and in particular those that express certain doubts, have a negative impact on the application. For example, a lot of the letters written for women are using more softer around caring, and they're contributing and supporting, whereas for men, oh, they're outstanding, they are strong scientists, and they have a strong relationship, and so on and so forth. And since they are more frequent for women candidates, they kind of have more doubt-raising terminology or phrases, women become at the greater disadvantage through this recruitment process. We've again covered this already, that even in case of identical qualifications, just purely based on gender, there is a difference in how we are evaluating the competence, the skills, and also what they are worth in terms of salary and mentoring. And it is really sobering, because in this case, it is really identical qualification. Is really just a name that is different. Again, another example of gender bias at recruitment is in this field of mathematics, where men are twice as likely to get a position. And without provision of information about candidates other than their appearance, men are twice more likely to be hired for a mathematical task than women. If ability is self-reported, women still are discriminated against, because employers do not fully account for men's tendency to boast and overstate their performance. And providing full information about candidates' past performance reduces discrimination, but does not necessarily eliminate that fully. Let's see if I can also put this one. This is actually a very interesting video as well, that I think is also providing a interesting example of how these can be tackled. Can you hear the sound?
Now that we've gone through all the applications for the open position of group leader, I would like us to review the ones that we shortlisted. Let's start with Emma.
Well, she has a strong publication record. She published a paper in a high-impact journal last year.
Yeah, but she's clearly collaborating closely with the head of department. She also has a grant together with him. So I'd like to see some evidence that she actually has some ideas of her own. I'm worried that she might lack independence.
I'd like us to take a step back here. So one of our hiring criteria is independence. Let's remember how we defined independence and how we decided to evaluate it. And then we need to make sure to evaluate every candidate in the same way.
Emma hasn't given a lot of talks about her work yet, has she?
I might be able to explain that. A friend of mine knows Emma pretty well, so I happen to know a few things about her.
For the moment, don't share that information with us as it might make our evaluation less objective.
Yeah.
And we'd agreed that we wouldn't take conference talks as a selection criterion.
Sure. Agreed. Let's move on.
Yes, you're right.
What do the reference letters say?
One of Emma's letters says that she's knowledgeable, reliable, and easy to get along with. Well, that's just minimal reassurance.
And what about Lucas?
According to one of Lucas's letters, he's an outstanding scientist doing excellent research.
That is indeed faint praise for Emma. But we know that there can be subtle differences in reference letters for men and women. So let's keep that in mind and maybe go through them again.
Yes, and in case of doubt, we might put certain reference letters aside.
Or give the referees a call.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure.
So did you get here okay?
Of course. This place is very easy to find.
His first impression on me is not that great, so I need to be extra careful that that doesn't cloud my judgment.
So it seems we did our PhD at the same university.
Really? I love that place.
Yeah, me too. I like her, but I have to be careful here. It seems we have some things in common, but I have to keep in mind that this is just a first impression.
Very nice publication record, including a recent first author paper in a high-impact journal. Congratulations. So let's move on to the next topic, which is teaching.
Very nice publication record, including a recent first author paper in a high-impact journal. Congratulations. Can you just tell us a bit more about what exactly was your contribution to that paper?
And do you have any additional ideas how to strengthen your hypothesis?
So before we call in the first candidate, let me remind you that we are conducting structured interviews, as similar as possible for all candidates. And let's monitor ourselves for biases, okay? That was an intense day of interviews. So what do you think of our candidates? What about Lucas?
In the end, I was really impressed with Lucas. He's definitely my favorite.
My doubt about him is that he's currently at a rather low-ranking university. So I wonder if he's really that good.
His science is great. He's very outgoing and communicative. I'm sure he'd be a great addition to the department.
And what about Emma?
Emma seems great, but let's be realistic about it. I know from a friend that she has 2 very young kids, and her husband is a top manager. So I think she might be less committed than Lucas.
That was an intense day of interviews. Our aim is to evaluate the candidates as objectively as we can. So we're going to be going over the hiring criteria that we defined, and we're going to evaluate each criterion one by one in every candidate, okay? And let me remind you that we will not be making the final decision today, but we will meet again in a few days.
Great. Let's get started.
Yeah.
So before we just go, and there are like 3 different resources that might be useful. So one is the gender decoder, one is gender bias calculator, where you can put in the text and it can give you highlights about if it's too much female associated or male associated words. And again, there are much more information and resources available at Project Implicit. It's a Harvard, and there's also tests for doing self-assessments of your biases. Do feel free to have a look at that. So just a few last slides around coming back to what we know about gender and career management. Again, academic and professional merits or excellence are not gender neutral concepts, as we kind of have discussed today over and over again. Let me just move these around, sorry, so I can actually see most of you here. Again, a lot of these are issues that we discussed. Recruitment and appraisal criteria are not always defined and communicated transparently, and they're not really structured in a way that we can evaluate and assess candidates in the exact same way. And of course, there are gender biases and other biases that we know can creep into the whole process and can influence the final decision making. We have a better understanding of how they work and what impact they might have. But again, we need much more to just really try to address these issues and minimizing that. What I want to kind of come back to is it's really important not only to focus on addressing individual cognitive biases. We all have those biases. It's not a kind of a game of blaming different people. It's really also to understand and recognize that there are higher level structural issues, and there are systems and frameworks and organizational and institutional culture that also cultivates and allows for these kind of biases to be reinforced and reproduced, that really allows that ignorance and injustice to occur. So again, really keeping in mind that it's not only about addressing individual biases, but it's creating an enabling environment, creating a system and procedures that can be just, fair, transparent, and accountable. So we are usually talking about what instruments are available for us to help address gender biases. And again, I would really highlight that it's really not only about gender biases. It's again, intersectionality plays a very important role to keep in mind gender, racial, other biases around people living with disability, age, ageism. So again, we are kind of constantly tackling a number of different biases. So keeping that in mind, in addition to gender of course becomes a cross-cutting issue when, you know, as a woman of color, as a woman living with disability, as a woman refugee or migrant background, you might experience a compounded, an additional and amplified level of discrimination. There are, again, tools around addressing and minimizing biases. Awareness raising and training have been mentioned several times. Again, there have been more and more instruments for gender-sensitive recruitment around, you know, the language around job descriptions and the guidelines and checklists for the recruitment processes. Diversity in recruitment committees was brought up as well in the discussion several times, trying to see if there are ways to do a double-blind assessments or blind assessments. And again, positive and affirmative action could also actually be instrumental in driving a change into the system. One thing that I want to bring up, and this is an example, again, as I mentioned, I'm working on and doing a kind of a rapid literature review around what whether subconscious or unconscious bias trainings actually work. And there was a couple of handbooks and references that I came across that I thought might be useful for this crowd. There's this process that is called ABS process, kind of aiming at unconscious bias reducing processes, that it kind of highlights strategies for HR professionals and leaders in organization to adopt in managing unconscious bias. And it's really based on 5 different phases. One, as mentioned, awareness, trying to include implicit bias assessment trainings and educational awareness raising workshop. But as mentioned, that's not going to be enough, but also trying to cultivate the culture what enables individuals to confront these biases, whether they're experiencing themselves or they're witnessing being done to other colleagues or something. label those biases that are affecting the workplace environment. This brings really them to a level of consciousness where leaders and executive can really understand how biases are actually operated in their institutions and how it affects hiring, decision-making, and organizational culture. Organization culture can be very powerful because that's much is so much more subtle and is so less tangible. So, you know, it really cultivates that, allows the freedom for these biases to be reproduced. And that's actually an important aspect to discuss. And again, discuss and allow an open environment for discussions and developing strategies to addressing the biases and involving the different level of the organizations in those conversations. And finally, reorganizing structures. I think, you know, big institutions, academic institutions are often very big, very old, and the systems in place that are really difficult to change. But I think that's really going to be the key of reorganizing the structures, challenging the system and the process in the organization, and really trying to reinventing recruitment, training, hiring, promotion, retention, and interviewing processes that can reduce the biases to the extent possible. These are references for some of these approaches that you can look up and read more if you're interested. And finally, a couple of examples of practices that could have a potential impact. Again, making sure that at least one man or woman for every round of recruitment, if not the call is closed, that there is equal number of female and male candidates. And again, I would also encourage to go beyond the binary and thinking also about the diversity. The cascade model, I have to say, I'm not very familiar with that. I don't know if anybody else is. Christina, if you're familiar with that.
Yes, yes.
Share a bit more about that.
Yeah, there is this German cascade model and the women professors program in Germany. Oh, Kirsten, you raised the hand. Just in brief, I will leave Kirsten to continue. So German higher education and research institutions have been encouraged to implement the model for promotion, in which a quota of target proportion of women is set for each career level that corresponds to the proportion of women at the next lowest qualification level.
So finally, the last example is expanding time limits for applications for female applicants with children under the age of 10. That has been done by the Academy of Sciences in Hungary.
I would complete here this idea. In March 2009, the Hungarian Academy of Sciences accepted Equal Opportunities Framework Program, and that means is the extension of age limits for female researchers who have children under the age of 10, means that they have opportunities to apply for scholarships, fellowships, and grants with an age limit, and the age limit is extended by 2 years, 2 more years after each child under the age of 10 for female and male researchers who certified that they stayed with the child or the children on parental leave. And also this program, very visionary program, I would say, is also extended to single parents.
Excellent. Exciting to see. More examples and good practices you can find at IGE's website, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with.
Okay, I will write the website in the chat for you to use it at your convenience.
And we will also ask the GE Academy if they can share the slides so you can all have. And here is a list of references of some of the issues we've talked about for you to read more if you're interested.
Thank you all for your participation. The main conclusion is that indeed there is gender bias in the academic field. Definitely such a high level as the academia should not be this type of bias, but it still exists. History show, like the Matilda effect, show that this happened in the past also, but the positive thing is that definitely there are instruments that we can use, and the fact that many of you are working already in gender equality departments in your institutions is a really awesome thing. And this is really encouraging for the other institutions to follow this type of best practice and examples. Another conclusion would be the fact that these types of trainings are really useful. Beside capacity building and beside empowerment, the meetings within such environments, even if they are designed as being online meetings, they are very useful for doing networking. And being inspired by your suggestion, Leah, would be really great if we can connect further, and why not maybe join common projects, common research. It's definitely a huge advantage to identify specific persons doing research in gender or being in an academia, and to be able to develop any partnership beyond our country borders. So this is a huge advantage.
I enjoy a wonderful, restful evening, everyone. Have a good day. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.